Hello, beautiful Unitarian Universalists of Door County. I am so excited to share with you today. I'm Reverend Christina Leone-Tracy, and I serve as the Senior Minister of the UU Fellowship in Appleton. I have tried repeatedly to guest preach for you, and for various reasons, including my own health challenges and the short notice adoption of my younger son, it has never worked out. And the pandemic means that I still don't get to see you in person, but I do hope to do so soon. At the congregation I serve, we are wrapping up a month of services on the theme, a community of embrace. As a part of this, we invited people to submit photos to share during our online services with their arms outstretched, ready to offer a hug. It's been such a joy for me to see those pictures. I miss people. I'm a hugger. It's one of the perks of ministry that it is usually part of my job description. And I know you might not know me, but this will come to no surprise to anyone who knows me even a little bit. I am an extrovert. Now, that doesn't mean, as some people assume, that I'm gregarious and outgoing, although that can sometimes be true. Extroversion and introversion refer to where you get your energy. As an extrovert, I get my energy from being around people, whereas introverts need some time alone to recharge. The energy exchange that happens during Sunday mornings, in the services, in the hallways, in the coffee hour, with the kids running around, I leave those days feeling simultaneously physically tired, but mentally and spiritually energized. Those moments of embrace were thrown entirely out the window last March when the pandemic descended upon us. And in order to stay physically safe, we needed to stay physically separate. As an extrovert, my recharge opportunities of being around people disappeared. Now, I am very thankful for the possibilities that are granted to us by Zoom or YouTube, Facebook, email, and all the online ways that we are staying connected, but it's not the same. Don't get me wrong, I kind of enjoy the 10-second commute time and the fact that I get to wear slippers while I'm preaching, but I would put on real shoes in a flash if it meant that I could give you a hug. Right now, Wisconsin is among the very worst hotspots for COVID outbreak in the country. There are political and civil uprisings and unrest. And all of this, just as the air is getting colder and outdoor gatherings are becoming less and less possible, we are all in need of embrace. And this is why we exist. This is why we Unitarian Universalist congregations and religious communities in general exist, to provide loving embrace, especially for those who need it the most. Recently, at our fellowship's governing board meeting, we were having a discussion about the desire that we all have to come to this place and feel comforted. But yet, it is part of our theological tradition not to just sit back and passively receive the comfort, but to actively provide it, to provide healing and justice for others in the world through our actions. One of the things that came up at that board meeting was the idea attributed to the theologian Martin Marty that God afflicts the comfortable and comforts the afflicted. And therefore, religious institutions should do so as well. It's our job to urge those of us with comfort to move outwardly toward loving action, even if it's uncomfortable. And then For those who need comfort the most, we should be, as we used to say in the South, loving on those people. Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Now, finding where we are on that spectrum of comfortable versus afflicted is the challenge. And of course, our place on that spectrum will change day to day, moment to moment. Many of us are bursting with blessings in life, things to be grateful for, privileges we possess. But even those of us with blessings and privileges are struggling, especially right now. We are grieving lost loved ones and being expected to do so from a distance. We are missing opportunities, stressed about day-to-day decision making and the systems that are failing all of us. We all need some comfort. But some of us are, as is sometimes said, at the margins, already pushed aside in a world that centers power and privilege. And the pandemic and the political unrest have made those margins even more vulnerable. As I've been thinking about this concept of embrace, I was recently made aware of the metaphor that Lutheran pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber wrote about in her book, Shameless. She also shared about it recently in a blog post entitled Corners. Now, let me see if I can screen share the picture for you because it's helpful to understand what she is talking about. Can you see that picture? Let's see. Is that working? Okay, I really hope you can see this picture. That is of taken from an airplane looking down on crops, and there are little circles. Putting my earrings on while we show this picture as well. This picture is of crop circles, not crop circles in the alien sense of the word, but circles of crops as seen from an airplane. So here's what Reverend Nadia Bolz-Weber wrote. When looking out the window of an airplane at the geometry of industrial agriculture below me, I would wonder, like a dumbass city girl, why in the world do farmers plant circles of crops in lots that are square? Well, after a little research, I discovered that in 1940, just 29 miles from my apartment, a man named Frank Zybach invented the center pivot irrigation system, essentially revolutionizing farming in America. In his system, the watering equipment turns on a pivot, allowing sprinklers to water crops in a circular pattern. It ends up, the crops aren't planted in circles, they're just watered that way. The water never gets to the crops in the corners. God, Nadia Bolz-Weber writes, planted so many of us in the corners, and yet the center pivot teachings of the church never seem to make their way to us. She continues at the end of her blog post, quote, "It may feel as though some of us have been relegated to the corners, but here's the thing. From the corners, I can see the whole room. I love the corners. I always have. It is where I will always choose to sit because I love outcasts, queers, the girls who talk too loud. I love humor that comes out of lives that have not been easy. I love drunks and single dads and sex workers and the guy who lost a leg in the war. These are my people. And so here's what I hope," she writes, "that what is shared here is water, God willing, for those planted in the corners." This is my hope too. As Unitarian Universalists, we are uniquely positioned to be truly, authentically welcoming. We open our arms to people of many paths in life without concern for creed or doctrine. We hold the doors open for people who historically have been excluded from traditional faiths. But in some ways, we continue to fall short of our goal and our potential. We as UUs have a tendency to get stuck in partisanship and classism, and we focus on irrelevant battles. Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd at the UU congregation in DC calls them fake fights. They are fake fights about terminology or particular expressions of theology. Do we use God language or not? Do we use this hymn or that hymn? Robert's Rules of Order. And we forget that our focus is embrace. Our focus, our purpose is to provide the embrace that each of us needs at some time or another, and definitely right now, and to focus on embracing those who Boltz Weber says are planted in the corners. What a beautiful focus. That's so much more meaningful and fun than all that other stuff, right? Now, as a minister, I get to be a close observer of people, and I have learned one very important thing about human nature, that we are full of contradictions. Now, I absolutely know for sure that I need to eat healthy food when I am feeling stressed, but time and time again, I find myself in the kitchen with a bowl of Fruit Loops as a sugar-laden coping mechanism. We need our fellowships and our spiritual practices the most in times of crisis, and yet it is one of the easiest things to let go when all the other demands of life impede upon our time and energy. Trust me, you will receive no guilt, zero guilt from me or any minister if you can't make it to services regularly. We get it. And yet, we know that what is being offered in our communities might actually provide some of that sustenance and embrace that we know people are hungry for right now. So we hope that you will take advantage of it in whatever way you are able. Another contradiction in human nature is that we tend to love offering support to one another, but we are afraid to ask if it's specifically needed, and we are even more afraid to ask when we are in need. I see this over and over again at the fellowship where I serve as a minister. People poured in their generous support for our minister's discretionary fund. We now have more funds than we have ever had in the past to offer to people who are in need. And yet people rarely take us up on the offer of financial support. I appreciate the power of pride and dignity and not wanting to take a handout. But on the other hand, the offer is there. It is extended. The system does not work if everyone wants to cook a casserole, but nobody is willing to eat one. Embrace is a two-way street. Both people have to open their arms. Both people have to be willing to offer and to accept the embrace. In that reading we heard earlier, Reverend Sean Parker Dennison spoke about vulnerability. He wrote, quote, "To invoke love is to play the fool, the one more concerned with loving than with appearance or reputation, the one ready and willing to be vulnerable, abandoning everything that gets in love's way." I think that vulnerability is some of what is behind this human contradiction, not wanting to expose ourselves to be wrong or weak or whatever else is holding us back from the yes of true embrace. But Parker Dennison has more to say about this. He puts a positive spin on this concept, writing, quote, "To invoke love is to approach each day and every person with wonder, anticipating love's arrival. Is this the moment? Is this love's grand entrance? Is this person the embodiment of love? Am I the one?" This flips the whole concept of vulnerability on its head and gives excitement and anticipation to each embrace. Is this offer of a casserole, or this card in the mail, or this check for $300 love's grand entrance? Is this person providing chairs and water bottles at the polls the embodiment of love? Is my effort to support Black-led organizations emerging out of my own commitment to love? Is this how we will give and receive embrace in these times? And yet, Parker Dennison also reminds us to invoke love is to take the risk of inviting chaos, to visit the spaces you spent so much time making tidy, and watch as the breath of life scatters everything you have only just folded and put away. To offer and receive embrace is not a guaranteed success. Back to vulnerability, there is risk inherent in embrace. And yet, this is the risk of living fully, of embracing each other and reaching into the corners to offer embrace beyond the circle. We might mess up. We might get it wrong. We can feel certain that we will not do any of this perfectly. It will not be tidy. It might be chaotic. But I found this picture recently. Let me see if I can screen share it with you. Hold on. I want you to see it. This is a picture of Reverend Leah Angiri, the associate minister at our fellowship, and me embracing at the installation service a few years ago when I was installed as the senior minister here at the fellowship. And our minister emeritus, Reverend Roger Burchausen, is looking on joyfully. I love that picture. Of course, it makes me a little sad because I miss big gatherings in our sanctuary. And it also brings back memories of embrace, of that physical embrace with Leah, with so many in our congregation looking on. It was a risk. It was a risk for them to call me as their minister. It was a risk for us each to commit to this faith that asks so much of us, even in hard times. It was a risk for Leah and I to agree to be on a ministry team together. Who knows, we might have not been a good fit at all, but it turns out we work really well together. That moment of embrace, and so many of the ones that have come after, wow, we know when it feels right. I hope, even as the world continues to be hard and scary and filled to the brim with anxiety for all of us, and especially those of us who live where the water doesn't easily reach, I hope we will embrace each other again and again and again in all the ways that we as UUs do best, through our love and our connection, support, and commitment. May you open your arms, exposing your vulnerable heart, invoking love to be love for someone else. May you feel the embrace, and may you lean yourself gently into it. May we embrace each other, even now, from a distance. May it be so, and amen.